Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast. This episode, Making Your Choir Thoughts Public. I've noticed in the 6 months that I've been doing this show that there is a hunger for questioning and exploring choral and educational topics at a philosophical level, about asking why, offering answers, and dialogue. We don't get much of this at conventions. We get presentations. We get a bit in college, but they mostly are lectures and prescriptions. So I invited Adam Paltrowitz of the Choral Clarity Blog to join me in discussing this brave new world and his experience in the blogosphere. Before we get too much farther down the road of the topic of the show, I do want to reach out and thank the sponsors for the program. As you know, those of you who've been listening since the beginning, I have had support from the beginning from sightreadingfactory.com and ryanmain.com. It is now the end of July. I am recording this as the last episode in July, and teachers are getting ready to start heading back to school and making plans for next semester. This would be a great time for you to get signed up for your programs for sightreadingfactory.com memberships so that you can have the cutting-edge tools that I've been talking about on this show of customizable music literacy program for your students, no matter what their level is, and I mean no matter what their level is. This is for the kid who's never looked at a quarter note before, all the way to professional level singers that I can throw level 7s and 8s at them now that blow their adult minds. So it really truly is customizable to whatever level is appropriate for what you're doing. So head over to sightreadingfactory.com. You also are going to want to program a piece or two by Ryan Main. So head over to ryanmain.com and check out his offerings. He is a self-published independent composer and clinician doing some awesome work based here in Kansas City, but his website, of course, is accessible anywhere. Cool thing that he does on ryanmain.com is he offers a site license. So no matter how many copies of a piece you need, you pay one fee and you can distribute it as many times as you'd like. And to make it even better, you can go and use the promo code Choralosophy and get 10% off of his site fee and still get to make all the copies that you want. So check out ryanmain.com and sightreadingfactory.com and use promo code Choralosophy at both sites to get 10% off your membership or purchase. And they would know that you listen to this show and support this show, and that's something that is a win-win for everybody. So head over to those two awesome musician-supported and musician-owned companies and check them out. So I want to tell you a little bit about making this episode before we get into it. I had a lot of fun making this episode, but it was a little bit stressful. Coming to you, recording and producing this entire episode from Key West, Florida. I've been out of town for most of the month of July. My dad lives here in Key West, and which does not suck, by the way. One of the things, if you've ever been to Key West, it's a really cool culture down here. You don't come here for the beaches, you come here for the culture. And my dad lives here, and all the houses and all the properties in Key West are very old and very small. And so my dad, being retired, is not using the house this week. He's off on his boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean, who knows where. Hopefully he'll make it back. But we got to use the house while it was empty, so we've been hanging out down here. So as you can see, the backdrop's a little bit different, but I do also want to apologize in advance for any potential noises that you would not normally hear in the background of this show. I can't predict necessarily what kinds of noises, so let me list for you some possibilities. You may or may not hear chickens. Drunk people is a very high likelihood. It's also, like I said, it's an old house. It's well over 100 years old, so just everything's noisy. So the air conditioner vent is way noisier than in my house back in the suburbs in the Midwest. Just lots and lots of things. Oh, birds, really loud tropical birds. Airplanes will fly overhead at certain points. I'm going to do my best to filter out any background noise so that you can concentrate on the conversation, which we hope is stimulating, but that is going on, and I know you're not feeling sorry for me, but I just did want to let you know that we will be having some probably some guests. Speaking of guests, we're also here with another family, so the house is full of kids, and I've done my best to sedate them, metaphorically speaking, so that they don't interrupt the background noise too much. But we've been having some fun and decided, though, that even though it's been a while since I've published. Wanted to make sure that we could still get an episode in while we were down here. Plus, most of what I do with creating this show involves working my schedule around the guests. So the guests can record at a certain time, so I'm going to jump on and record whenever that is, no matter where I am. So I've already kind of built myself a go bag for the podcast where everything I need in a makeshift sense to record the show can fit into my little briefcase, and I can do one, maybe not in the ideal soundproof setting or close to that I have back at home, but that I can do a makeshift recording wherever I am, which I think is kind of fun. It's kind of an adventure to do shows from a variety of places. So this episode came to be really from my own curiosity as I've started. About 6 months now have gone by since the show launched in February, mid-February, and the learning experience has been very interesting, and the learning curve has been very steep. I've gotten to the point where I'm feeling quite a bit more comfortable sharing with you all what I'm thinking and feeling about the topics. They're becoming more and more raw, more open, mostly because of the listener feedback. The listener feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I've gotten all types of responses. In fact, one of the things I'm working on now, I think I've said that I've been working on it for quite a while, but I promise, it's just taking a little bit more time than I thought, working on a listener response type of a show, or at the very least a segment of a show, focusing only on the listener response. But the listener response overall has been very, very positive. And that is people like you who actually sit and listen to the program. What's also been interesting, though, thank you for that, by the way. That should go without saying, but you are the lifeblood of this program being able to exist, but also being interesting enough for me to continue to do, is because people listen and then respond to continue the conversation. One of the things that's been interesting, though, on the flip side of that, is that in order to get the show to be visible to people, I have to create advertisement. I have to sell the show. And in order to sell the show, I've got to make it visible. And one of the things that I've discovered, and my guest, Adam Paltrowitz, in a little bit is going to talk about this with his blog, is also true. There has to be some type of visual eye candy / clickbait in order for people to pay attention. And I've gotten better at this, about creating some types of images with some nuggets of wisdom from the guests on the program in order to get people talking about the concept and the topic of the show. And if I can get 100 people to talk about it, a good day would be that of those 100 people that talk about it on Facebook or talk about it on Twitter, 5 to 10 will start actually listening to the show. Now, that's a sad commentary on our attention spans, probably. However, it is how the game is played. And so in doing that, what I'm discovering is that even though the vast majority of the feedback has been positive, a lot of the feedback that is negative is coming from people who clearly don't listen to the show. Now, that could be a variety of reasons. It could be that there are people who are listening to the show who really have negative thoughts about it, although I would question whether or not they would then continue to listen to the show. However, it could be. I'm not trying to discontinue or dismiss the possibility that someone could listen to the show because they like hearing opposing viewpoints, get really confused or upset, and then just not have the courage or feel that it's necessary or worthwhile to write into the show and share that idea, although it is welcome. If that's you, if I'm talking to you, that is welcome. You're welcome to do that. I'll put on my big boy pants, and this is the point of the show, is to really dive into these topics. That being said, most of the people who have written in or commented in a negative way about the show, and this is, again, a very small number of people so far, have been clearly not listening to the show. And that's par for the course. That's kind of the way making your thoughts public will be. And that's why so many people talk about on social media how they just can't go on Facebook and talk about X, or they can't go on Facebook and talk about Y. I've discovered that it's not even about the topic. You can. I've got over 4,000 friends on my Facebook page now. It doesn't matter what you post about. Somebody will disagree with you about it. So I think we have two choices in the world that we live in today. One is never talk about what you believe on social media about anything. Don't state a claim, don't make an opinion known just to avoid the possible blowback. I respect that. If that's what you've decided to do, I respect that. For me, I can't do that. I just can't. There is a switch in me that apparently is flipped to where I feel that if I were to make that choice of that that's how I wanted to live, then I would be letting people who don't want to ask why win. And this show is all about asking why and making a claim and being willing to have someone ask why back. That's what conversations are. And so that's been the mission of the show since the very beginning. Most of my positive feedback has been response to the mission of the show more than it has been the actual content of the show, which I'm proud of, and I think that's an awesome thing. So I decided, here we are 15 episodes into the show, really more than 15 if you count the multi-part episodes that I've published. But we've got a body of content now on choralosophy, where people could listen to quite a few episodes to get a flavor and a feel for what the show is all about. And those are the voices that I really am going to pay attention to going forward. For people who write into the show to make their commentary at choralosophy@gmail, or if they go on Choralosophers on the Facebook page, those are the people I'm going to listen to. Everybody else is going to get polite responses back, but I'm not going to let it derail or change what it is that we're doing here. I'm really trying to build a community. Trying to build a community of people who want to ask why and want to dive in and try to lean towards truth. So in order to do that, I invited Adam Paltrowitz on because he's been doing this quite a bit longer than I have. You've probably seen his Choral Clarity blog posts. You might not have even known it was him or that that's what it was called, because they've been shared so many times that it's become an institution in the choral profession. And as I said in the brief show intro, it's a format that the technology now allows us to access that was not accessible before. We have these chances to do this long form exploration of choral topics that we don't even get really in college, and we definitely don't get at conventions, because the format just the conventions and college, of course, are necessary. They are part of our learning process. But this new technology, or newer technology, is allowing us to go much, much deeper. So Adam and I get to talk a little bit about his experience and a little bit about mine, but his experience of making his choral thoughts public, and some of the blowback and some of the kickback that he's received, as well as some of the positive feedback that his very thought-provoking blogs have received. Okay, I'm on with Adam Paltrowitz, who is probably best known to many of you in the choral world as the author, the mind behind Choral Clarity, but is also a choral director and music educator, and so multifaceted as many of us have to be in our choral profession in order to really make a difference. And so I'm really excited to have Adam on to talk today a little bit about what it's like to be a person who puts their choir thoughts out in public. Some people are brave enough to do that, and some people are not. And Adam has definitely been, for a while now, brave enough to do that. So thank you, Adam, for coming on and making some more thoughts public.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. This is kind of the way I like to start all the talks that I do, is just let you, in your own words, talk to us about your life story. What got you from little baby Adam to now?
Wow. Okay. Well, first of all, I grew up playing the piano. That was my main instrument. I was not what you call a classically trained pianist. I did start piano lessons very, very early, and I always had a good ear, but I was not refined at any level. I was playing Billy Joel. That was my main thing. Billy Joel, songs off the radio. Taking some piano lessons. I took them straight from maybe 5 years old till about 14, took some time off. And then right before college, I started taking lessons again. So if I was playing a song that you liked, I probably sounded pretty good. But if you asked me to play Debussy, you would not have been really impressed. Along with that, I played the piano in my high school orchestra, which was a district orchestra. It was 3 high schools combined together. And I played the piano in my chorus, which is a relatively weak chorus. It was select, but it was not what I would consider to be select.
Mm-hmm.
And I played the piano, and I knew that I had a knack for music. I knew that I could teach. I knew it was in me, but I was not a great pianist, as I explained, and I was not a singer. So, and I had taken some private singing lessons in high school as well, but I knew that that was not my forte by any stretch. So I was this student that didn't know how they were going to get into a college for music education, because you have to pick a major and you have to audition. And I knew that piano playing was not going to be impressive after you heard Beethoven or Mozart.
Okay.
And I knew that my singing was not going to be impressive no matter what. But I knew I wanted to be a high school choir teacher, choir director, because I loved that experience and I thought I could do it really, really well. So there was really no place for me in high school, and there was really no place for me to audition. But I did get lucky. I got into NYU, went to New York University, and I took piano for 2 or 3 semesters, and I switched over to voice. I didn't have to give a voice recital. I just got some background, and I also studied composition. And then I went off to grad school at Columbia University, and I earned 2 masters and some advanced degrees as well there. And with all of that, I was teaching. I had already been teaching. I started teaching high school at 20 years old in New York City while I was a junior in college. It was one of those things that they just allowed you to do because there was an opening. And so I taught about 15 hours a week. And then I graduated in December and started in January for a leave replacement, middle school. And then I started in September the following year when I was turning 22 in Plainview. Plainview Old Bethpage JFK High School, and I've been there for the last 21 years, starting my 22nd year there. And I give you that whole background because that's the premise behind what I think that choir is for everybody, and I don't believe in an audition group as the prime musical opportunity at high school, because I think about somebody like myself who's got all the musical knowledge in my head. I heard everything. I could teach and explain everything, but I probably couldn't produce at that time a beautiful phrase or hold my part a certain way as well as somebody else could. But I know that my contribution would have been great if given the right opportunity in those groups.
Right.
So that's my background, and then and so I've been in the same school for 21 years, and I've thought constantly about what about a student like me? What about that student who might be talented, but they don't fit the mold of a traditional choir student, or for that matter, band student or orchestra student. So with all of that said, I've built a program for many years. We do have select type groups, which we could talk about later, but the core of the program is self-selected large group choirs. But I was surrounded by great colleagues that I respect very much in my area who were getting a lot of recognition for taking their select groups of 30 and 40 to do festivals, competitions, and so on. And I certainly think that they're great choir directors. They know what they're doing. They're skilled. They pick great repertoire. I would love to have my child in their choirs. However, I was saying, well, what about all of those other students in that school? What about the me? Where would I have been in that school? And would I have ever become a choir director if I had been in their program? And so I said, I'm going to start writing about this. And I put an article out to my state music association, who quickly didn't respond. And so then I said, well, let me just do it as a blog. Let me So I created a website, I put out the blog, and I put it in, I'm a choir director and a few of the other groups at the time, and it hit. And there were, I'd say I had maybe 5 or 6 thousand people who viewed it on the first day. And I said, maybe I'm on to something here. So that's when I started writing more and more about this topic, which is the overarching concept. So because a lot of the things that I write about now are not necessarily specific to self-selected choirs, but they're still under the umbrella of that thought process.
Right.
So that's where I am here.
So that's that actually, yeah, that gets me ahead of time to a question I was going to ask. What? So it sounds like your maiden voyage for your blog was that topic, and I remember that. I remember that article very well. I have some disagreements with that idea, but I can understand. I absolutely understand where you're coming from. My first thought when I read it was that and of course I hadn't heard you describe yet kind of some of the backstory of your own childhood and what might have influenced that.
Right.
My first response to that would have been that I totally understand where you're coming from on that, but I would then say if we are as teachers doing our jobs, then we might find the little Adam that didn't know he could do certain things and figure out a way for him to contribute in any type of program, even one that is that has those select ensembles. And I think there might be a room for gray area too, in the sense that, like, if I think about in my own program, by far the most visible ensemble is our most advanced ensemble, but that doesn't mean that only those kids get a good education.
Right.
There's room for both. In other words, I think that's a philosophical idea that you have to take all the way down to your ninth graders as they come in, is that, yeah, you might not have learned how to do X, Y, and Z that the older kids have done yet, but someday you could. And so let's explore that. So I think, but I totally appreciate where you're going with that. So I want to ask next. So once you had that first article that splashed, how long was it after that before you decided to start doing the regular blogging? And was it already called Choral Clarity at that first article, or did that come later?
Yeah, well, the first article itself was called 14 Secrets That Your Choir May Be Outstanding. And it lists 14 things that basically any kind of program, whether it's a small rural school or a huge school, can be doing to make your group great. Because at that point in time, I was addressing the concept that, going to your state festival and scoring well, or performing at Carnegie Hall, these are all wonderful experiences, but they do not validate a successful program. So I was giving secret indicators. It was 14 secret indicators. And so...
See, that I agree with. That part I definitely agree with, that there are way too many ways to measure success in a choral program other than what your top choir can do musically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just, I'll say one thing, I'll come back to this, regarding everything you said before. I do believe that the top students should have a select opportunity. I just want to be clear. I fully support taking your top 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever amount of students and giving them a select opportunity. What I'm against is their core musical experience being separating them out from the others, because the others gain so much from their presence. Mm-hmm. And I also would argue that those fantastic elite students that you are coaching privately, whether it's once a week for a 2-hour ensemble or twice a week, whatever it might be, or it might be a second period in the day, whatever it is, those kids are going to learn a great deal by being leaders in the other ensemble, by being section leaders, by helping others, by giving back. So I just want to be clear that I'm not saying that those select students should not get a select opportunity. I'm saying it should not be in place of being in a group where they're leaders for others.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that too. In fact, our program is structured in a way where the top 10% of kids are required in order to be in the top ensemble, the most advanced. I also am kind of trying to train myself away from saying the top
All right.
ensemble, because it prioritizes. I love all of my students, even the ones that have no idea what they're doing. But
Right.
the most advanced ensemble, that is, it represents about the top 10% in functioning ability musically and vocally. They're required to be in the ensemble also, that I guess you could say represents the top 30%, 30 to 35%. So it's a chamber choir of 32. And in order to be in the chamber choir of 32, they have to be in the concert choir of 100.
Yeah. As soon as you say that to me, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that. I've seen choirs that, well, many of them where the 32 don't have to be in the 100.
Right.
And I've seen others, which this is the worst of them, where those 32 kids show up at the concert and join the other 65 because they're learning their own repertoire and then learning the repertoire of the other choir. And so the other choir has been working with no leadership and they sound not so great. And then all of a sudden, the day of the concert, the knights in shining armor show up and infiltrate that sound. And that's what I'm trying to prevent. It's not that I do want to give all of my top, most advanced, most deserving singers the most musical opportunity possible. But I think part of that is giving back. And giving back will make them better musicians. It's not just, well, it's community service. They're going to become a better singer when they learn how to teach somebody else how to shape a phrase or help them hold their part or work with them on sight reading. But anyway, I wanted to digress for just 1 second and then go back and answer your question specifically. So I wrote the 14 secret indicators, and once I saw that, I said, this would be, I think there's a lot of information in here based on the responses I was getting that I wanted to dive into more. So I then wrote the erosion of the choral middle class, which is basically me, Now, not everybody has to be, I'll use the word internally talented, meaning I don't have an external means, but internally, I hear everything and all of that. But it was about the choral middle class. What happens to that average student? And so I wrote the erosion of the choral middle class, and then I started talking about the weakest singers. I started talking about the elite, the top singers, and what happens to them. And so I started writing a series of articles. And once I finished that series of articles, that's when I came up with the idea of choral clarity, because I'm trying to bring some clarity to the choral field on a topic that I think is overlooked or ignored or intentionally ignored. And I'm going to go with the intentionally ignored, because it makes people question what they do. And so I said, you know what, I want to...
People don't like that.
They don't like that.
People don't like that, that's for sure.
Which is why I admire what you're doing, because I've listened to about 4 of your podcasts so far. Haven't gotten to all of them yet. And you're bringing on people with differing viewpoints and having a discussion. And to me, that's what this is about. I'm not here to prove you wrong. I'm here to have a dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel that at this point in time, the major organizations are really willing to listen to that yet. Because where is that self-select choir of 80? That's anybody that wants to come, and they're great. They're fantastic. They sing Leonardo Dreams of His Flying Machine, and they sing all of that wonderful repertoire, and they sing it really, really well. But not quite as well as that select 60-voice group.
Right.
With that group.
And you could make the argument, which is the better, or which is the greater accomplishment of teaching?
Yes.
Can you, and I've made this argument on the show before, not really an argument, but just to point out that, when I work with professional singers, I can't claim the sound.
Right.
I didn't build that.
Right.
I contributed to the vision, but I didn't build that. But if you ask me if I'm more proud of when my 9th grade girls sound like women, I built that. And that requires more of my teaching and strategizing and psychology and trying to get under all of their pain from their childhoods and like all the things that you have to do to be a good choir teacher at the high school level takes a lot more of that. And I think you could also then extend that logic to, all right, what if you've got the choir of 80 kids that just signed up randomly? You'd have to do that to an even greater extent.
Yeah.
And you're right. What mechanism do we in the choral field have for recognizing those teachers?
Right.
You know, this is a different can of worms, but I feel like a lot of the choral organizations aren't really interested in that, but they're also not really interested in recognizing teachers for musical excellence either. I feel like a lot of times it's recognizing teachers who are willing to serve the choral organization itself.
Couldn't agree more. I,
But
which is, yeah,
that's a different can of worms.
But that's part of what we're doing here, because I don't feel like I need to be serving coffee at hospitality for the all county in order to get the opportunity to conduct an all county. If they think that I'm worthy of it, I'm willing to serve in the ways that I love to serve.
Mm-hmm.
People can serve coffee much better than I can. I'm not good at it. I spill things. I'm good at helping rehearsals and sectionals and interacting with students and interacting with teachers. And I know where my strengths are, and I'm more than happy to serve in the way where my strengths are, but I don't want to have to do it that way in order to be given the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for my choir to perform at a convention, for example.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have the same exact feeling. For me, organizing lots of details is not one of the things that I'm good at. So I've been asked so many times to be can put my name up for a president of a chapter of something, and I've always said no. First, because I have a wife that would kill me, and second because I tell them, you don't want me to do that. Like, you
Right.
might think that you want me to do that because I speak prettily, but I could do that if you want me to run the meeting and mediate people's disagreements. I'm good at that.
Right.
But I'm not good at keeping track of details, because what will happen is I will forget to do something really important, and then everyone will be mad at me. That's what will happen. I know that about myself, and so that's not the right job for me. But you're right; it does tend to be a hierarchy built upon willingness to donate certain services to the organizations.
Right.
And I also don't think either of us are saying that people shouldn't do that. Like,
No.
it's just not, shouldn't be the only sense of value.
And these organizations are wonderful. I
Yes.
support them.
Mm-hmm.
ACDA or NAFME. These are wonderful organizations that do so much good, and I support them 100%. But I do feel that they're missing the boat on several things, and they don't want to hear it, and they're not open to listening. And so, for me, writing this blog and creating the website was a means to reach people and try to, number one, see who else feels the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm helping them to articulate it more. Maybe they feel that way and they can articulate it better than I can because they've been doing it longer. And then trying to get more people to see that philosophy. And they can question it, but also, if they're going to question it, let's enter a dialogue. Let's not just question it saying, well, I disagree with you. Well, tell me why you disagree, and let me see if I could then respond to your disagreement with another side of
Mm-hmm.
how you could modify that. Because sometimes it's just a discussion. Sometimes, like what you were saying before, you sort of disagreed with me, but then you're really doing what I'm talking about.
Right. Right. And I think so. That's a good point. For me, the disagreement as the natural instinct came simply because it took me a second to figure out how the verbiage you were choosing to use didn't jive with the verbiage that I would choose to use. But it takes a conversation to understand that there's a lot of just semantic differences there.
Exactly.
It's not that much of a philosophical difference. In other words, you're not saying that there shouldn't be an advanced choir. Although at my first read of some of your stuff about that was kind of my first take, was that we shouldn't have those. But that being said, I completely agree with the overall concept of structuring your program so that your most advanced singers are also interacting with and collaborating with and being able to have a chance to be leaders with the less advanced students. That totally makes sense, and that's how I think a lot of direct. I think a lot of directors would agree with that. And in fact, on that topic, in your program, how is that structured? So you've already given us some, but could you go more detail into how, like, what's
So,
your class schedule like, and how does it
yeah.
all break down?
First of all, I teach in a wonderful district, Plainview Old Bethpage on Long Island. They're very supportive of music. So I just want to be clear, that I feel very fortunate in what I've been given. We don't have a huge enrollment in our population our music department is not super large, but the support system is great. So I've got a treble choir of any ninth and 10th grade treble voice, usually almost always females, but we call it treble choir because there are exceptions. But ninth and 10th graders, anybody that's a treble voice joins that treble choir, regardless of if they're the most advanced singer I've ever heard or they're brand new to singing.
Okay.
Then we have a mixed choir, which consists of 11th and 12th grade treble voices and all of the tenor and bass voices, usually men, always men, and so far. Um, so typically, a boy walks into the program. They're in the mixed choir for 4 years. A female walks into the program. They're in the treble choir for 2 years. They're in the mixed choir for 2 years. If they join in their junior year, they join in the age-appropriate group. They don't join. They don't start from the beginning. They're behind, but they're in the age-appropriate group based on their voice. In addition to that, we have 8 student-run a cappella groups. And these a cappella groups rehearse on their own on Sundays. And it's not a requirement to be in choir anymore. It used to be. It's not. But pretty much, I'd say 90% of the students are in choir. The remaining 10%, almost everybody is in band, orchestra, or music theory, or they're piano players. And very rarely a random student who is not at all involved in music.
Mm-hmm.
Those 8 groups are overseen by me, with a lot of student leadership where the students write their own arrangements. They do all the teaching themselves, and all that stuff. And we have nights of a cappella, winter and spring. Along with that, I just started a select a cappella group that is teacher-led, modeling it after J.D. Frizzell's program, The One Voice.
Oh, okay.
And I've been talking a lot with him. But the whole concept is I've got all the students are selecting in these student-run groups. They're all audition-based. They are heavily audition-based, where the 8 group leaders are in a room and everybody comes in and auditions, and the 8 groups then decide who they want to take into their groups.
Okay.
So that there's a lot of selectivity in there. But now I'm creating a teacher selectivity, a group where we hire arrangers and we hire coaches, and we're really building this to be a top tier group. With that said, all of those students have to be in the self-selected groups, and all of those students have to be in the choir. Okay. That's my parameter. So a student who is in my select group will be also experienced in giving back in the student-run groups, most likely a student leader in a student-run group, either an arranger or a manager or something, or a soloist. And then they're in the choir, and most likely, not in all cases, but most likely some kind of leader in there as well.
Wow. So when you say you have groups that are student led, are you in the room? No,
they rehearse on Sundays at there's different student houses. So there's 3 female groups, treble groups. There's 2 all male groups and 3 mixed groups. And students they could be in one mixed group and one unisex group. So all the unisex groups meet at the same time. I don't know the time, but let's just say it would be something like the unisex groups meet from 12 to 2, and the mixed groups meet from 3 to 5 on Sundays.
So then what are those for credit?
No, it's just extracurricular, and they're good. I mean, they're strong. These are groups we were on, like they were 2 of them were featured on. There was a show called Pitch Slapped with Deke Sharon and on Lifetime, and they competed against the 2 groups on, on the TV. So like these are strong, groups. I'll coach them from time to time, and we'll bring in coaches and all that kind of stuff. But this is their own arrangements. They write their own. They teach their own. They pick their own soloists. They decide who's in their groups. All of that stuff.
Interesting. So you kind of, I guess what I'm trying to work out in my head is what makes them still school affiliated ensembles is that I'm sure you have a set of rules for the groups and like standards and those types of things. And if they meet those, they're allowed to perform at school events and those types of things, but it's purely extracurricular. That's interesting. I'm trying to figure out if I could even get away with that in my district.
Well, here's how. Let me give you, because I know where you're going with this. So here's the challenge. Theoretically, the first thing a district is going to say is, no, you can't have a group that rehearses on their own. But think about what's happening. 10 students or 12 students are choosing to go over to somebody's house and do music.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're doing music. They've got a song ready. Now they come into you and they say, hey, I have a song ready. I did it myself. We did it ourselves. Can we sing it at the choir concert? You listen to them. They sound great. What do you say?
Well, I say yes. I think of course, philosophically, I'm down.
Right.
I think the school district, though, would tell me, at least mine, would tell me that that's fine. You can let them sing, but what you can't do is call that group a Lee Summit High School associated club or team or sport because the students are unsupervised.
Right. And that's the same thing here. It's no different. We have the same kind of stuff. It's a gray area, but the challenge is this. It's the club that I oversee has lots of events. So it's got Night of Acapella. It's got the spring night of acapella, winter night of acapella, the dress rehearsals, the auditions that I'm overseeing. It's got workshops. It's got college groups that are coming in to sing for us. It's got arranging workshops, beatbox workshops that are open to not just the students that are singing in acapella groups, but students that want to be in the acapella groups. So the club itself is advised by me and arranged by me, and there are opportunities. And my contact time with all the students is great. And all of the student leaders meet with me. We have monthly meetings or bi-weekly meetings to discuss things going on. But in the end, students choosing to rehearse on their own is not something that we can stop, because all they're doing is singing. They're not using school instruments. They're not even using school music. So they're just singing. So the question is, do we want to support the fact that these kids on their own are raising their own musical skill levels? Mm-hmm. And so you're right, there are challenges, because what if what's happening is inappropriate in a rehearsal? And things do happen. They do. And it is a gray area, and we have to figure out when those things happen how to handle it. But in the end, the parents understand that there is no teacher supervising it, but there is a parent in the house. Mm-hmm. Students are never alone. They're not rehearsing alone. They are rehearsing with a parent who has agreed to be the host, to have this happening in their house. But it is. But then you have to ask yourself, well, we have 8 groups doing this. 8 groups, 100 and something students that are getting this amazing experience. And that wouldn't be humanly possible in the school. Mm-hmm. Just not possible to make that happen unless they wanted me to be there an extra 30 hours a week.
Right. Wow. That's an interesting concept. I think that's pretty unique. That's an awesome trailblazing idea. And now I've got my head spinning about different ways that I could try to do something like that. I think the closest thing that we have in our program to student-led learning is we do a lot of sectionals that are student-led, and that all of our sectionals are student-led. But we also have our small ensembles that we put together for festivals, And with the more advanced students, so the students in my chamber choir, when they get divvied up into smaller groups for festivals, they're told that they're not going to get any help at all.
Right.
So they're just going to have to figure it out. I said, I haven't taught you how to read music for the last 4 years so that I can keep, if you can't figure this out, then you don't deserve to be in this choir in the first place.
Right.
So go do it, go figure it out. And they do. And then with the younger students, we give them more help. But then as they get older, so they do get some student-led things, but I like the idea of formalizing it a little bit more into like an ensemble that meets throughout the year to do those things. That's really awesome. Okay, so next gear, let's talk a little bit about the blog itself and some of the experiences that you've had getting an idea out there and then maybe getting it kicked back in your face a little bit. So tell us some stories if you have any have you just ever pissed anybody off?
Yeah. Oh, plenty. I'll tell you a few. One of them was I wrote an article entitled "How Do You Get to Carnegie Hall? Just Pay for It." And and what I tried to write, I mean, obviously when you write a title, you want to write something that's catchy because that gets people to read. That's how life works. I did not say that going to Carnegie Hall is a bad experience. I think it's a wonderful experience. If you want to take your choir to perform at Carnegie Hall at any of these events where it's just your choir, I'm not talking about like one where there's a guest conductor and you're doing a major work by a composer. I'm talking about your choir's performing on a program with 8 other choirs, elementary choir, middle school choir, whatever. And then all of a sudden in your local community, it's posted that your group earned the right to perform at Carnegie Hall, and it's into this big ordeal. What I was trying to explain is it's a wonderful opportunity, just like it's a wonderful opportunity to sing the national anthem at a baseball game or at a football game. These are opportunities. They are not achievements. And we need to separate opportunity from achievement. And what is an achievement and what is an opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
Stop patting ourselves on the back for opportunities. Start being gracious and have gratitude for your opportunities. And your achievements are a whole other thing. So I wrote this, and there's a travel agent / choral director in this community who ripped me apart, sent me some really, really nasty emails, and told me that I'm a fraud and I'm a phony and he hasn't figured me out yet and he doesn't know what I'm doing. How do I have the time to write this blog? I must not know what I'm doing as a teacher, and everything we possibly could. And I tried to have a dialogue because I thought that maybe we could come to a meeting of the minds where I was explaining to him, listen, I think it's great that you are setting up Carnegie Hall. I'm not insulting that. But what I'm telling you is that I'm called every other week at least to be asked for my choir to perform at Carnegie Hall.
We all are. Yeah.
We all are. Mm-hmm. So why is it an accomplishment? Because my kids are paying $250 each to sing at Carnegie Hall?
It's a business.
It's a business. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a great opportunity. But it's so this person was so rude that I just had to block them at a certain point because they kept going and they kept writing, and they wrote it on my personal Facebook.
Wow.
Even not, I didn't have a group yet. So that was one.
So let me get that straight. Yeah. So a choir director in your area with a side hustle working.
No, not in my area. In the country.
Oh, so okay, somewhere. Either way, has a side hustle, which is setting up choirs to go on tours and whatnot. Yep. And in his criticism of you, criticizes you for having a side hustle of writing a blog.
Yep.
Is that you? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So that sounds like the pot calling the kettle black to me, but that's interesting. So the idea was, I totally agree with that concept, by the way. I don't think I caught that blog, but I probably would have agreed with it a lot because, but here's what I think is the underlying cause and you might have touched on this in your blog, so tell me if you did, but I think one of the reasons that has to happen, in other words, choir directors do two things. They like to build their bios and making everything look like something they achieved because of their musical greatness.
Right.
That's number one. And number two, this is the more, I guess, pragmatic argument that I can understand why that verbiage gets put in a lot, because a lot of times with our local communities, in order for us to raise money for those types of things, they
Right.
have to think it's an achievement.
Right.
They have to be told that our students in Podunkville, Nebraska, or whatever, no offense, Nebraska people, I love you. Um,
Right.
but in order for that local community to get behind it financially, they have to believe that the students in Podunkville are truly unique and special, probably because they are of our genetic material and or whatever. And so there's this sense of like Homerism that
Right.
happens, and that's how, what that industry is dependent upon.
But
Uh,
does it? That's the way they have been. But I don't think so. I mean, I feel like if I wrote an email or letter to my parents and said, "We've been given a wonderful opportunity to perform at Carnegie Hall.
mm-hmm,
Not that choirs each year get to perform at Carnegie Hall, but we have this opportunity, and I think it would be a great opportunity." Why is it a great opportunity? Because the great performers of this world have performed there. Two, because the acoustics are magical.
mm-hmm.
Three, because it is a lifelong journey for so many people to perform at Carnegie Hall. We would love to give our students this opportunity.
That's great.
What's wrong with that? Why do we have to say we are in the right? We're the best choir in the world. Come on. To me,
Yeah.
you don't have to lie. There's a way. There's a genuine way to frame something, and then there's a fake way to frame things. And I just don't buy into it, because that is what goes back to the select stuff.
Uh-huh.
Select wonderful. Because why do you have a select group? Because you want to give those students a higher level of musical opportunity and accountability.
Mm-hmm.
That's not because you want to be recognized for what you do, and that's the way that you could perform, at whatever festival or to
Right.
pad. And that's it goes back to this concept.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually taken a stance similar to that for my whole career with the high school kids. Is that well, for a couple reasons. One, the demographics of the students that I teach uh, economically are not such that we can. I'm trying to say this in a politically correct way. We can't travel on the student's expense
Right.
very very much. It has to be a pretty once in a lifetime an achievement
Right.
for me to feel like I can stand up and use my political capital with the students and families that I interact with, which I've built up that capital over 15 years. And
Right.
I'm fortunate to be in a community where I'm very visible, well known, and trusted.
Hmm.
And so if I get up there and I say, guys, to my concert choir, for example, 100 kids, and say, guys, we all need to pull out $2,000 out of our pockets and go do this performance,
Right.
because this is an unbelievable opportunity or achievement. In the case of one trip that I'm thinking of, it really was an achievement. There was a composer that knew our work directly and wanted to work with us.
There you
Okay,
go.
and it's a really well known composer, and so I said, guys, this might not come along again for me as a teacher, but it definitely won't come along for you because you're only here for 2 more years or whatever.
Right.
Let's do this. And I did cash in my political capital on doing that, and we got 85 out of 100 kids to go,
That's amazing.
and it was great, and it was a trip of a lifetime in New York, and it was at Alice Tully, and it was wonderful. But I am unwilling to do that unless those types of criteria are present. So I'm not willing to get up and do the lie that you just described, which
Right.
is that, guys, we've got to go do this trip and then to the side of my mouth say that anyone can do if they pay $2,000
Yeah.
or whatever. It needs to be something that's unique to us. And I've actually taken quite a bit of flack from colleagues about that position.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
and
Because
they're
that's their ticket forward.
right, right. And I've been criticized because in my particular case, I guess you could say I have other tickets forward,
Yeah.
and so they see me as kind of standing in the way of their opportunities to do that.
Right.
There have been times when every group in our building went on the trip except for the choir.
Yep.
because I just didn't see it as an opportunity. And the other thing too, and I think that's one of the differences between like bands. I feel like, I don't have any data on this, but I feel like bands travel more than choirs. I don't know. Partly because if you're a band student or an orchestra student, you've already kind of bought in financially.
Yep, with the instrument.
Yeah, with the instrument and all the lessons or whatever, and your parents get to the point where they want to invest to make that initial investment worth it in their minds. Exactly. Whereas we, as choir teachers, we teach a lot of kids who didn't think they wanted to do music in the first place, and we sold them on a free class. They signed up thinking, oh, I'm going to get my fine arts credit with the cheapest possible way, to do it. It's easy, whatever. And then at some point we hooked them on wanting to do it. And that's like, for me, I feel like that's 60% of my students at the upper level are kids who came in thinking they were going to do it for 1 year. And so for me, I feel like it's a morally different scenario to try to ask them to plop down $2,000.
Right.
I want them to, I want them to feel like that is something that they truly have earned.
And with that said, now my district is more upper middle class as a whole. And so earlier in my career, we did tours. We used to do tours every year. And everybody went. Everybody could go. Not everybody went, but everybody can go. So we went to England, and I took the mixed choir, and I don't know, maybe 75, 80% went. We went to Italy, and 80 to 90% of the students went. And my point was, it was everybody. It wasn't my elite 20, because, as you know, when you sing in beautiful churches, your choir that's very good sounds amazing in a beautiful church. And that experience was transforming, not to my elite 20, but it was transforming to students who kind of sort of liked singing, and students who average. They sounded beautiful in there, and they got just as much meaning out of the experience. And we sang beautiful repertoire, and we sang at all the main venues, St. Mark's Cathedral, and the Vatican, and all of that stuff, and St. Paul's in England, and Wells Cathedral, and we did all of that stuff, and that was for everybody. Again, that was an opportunity. We were not chosen. I had a colleague that his group was chosen to perform at the Vatican. It's like, chosen to perform at the Vatican? What do you mean chosen? I mean, you have to pass a screening, or somebody's running a festival at the Vatican and your group applied, but that's framing it a different way, because we all can be performing everywhere. It was more about, we weren't chosen. We wanted to expose our students, and I wanted the parents to realize why it's different to go to England with your parents or on a teen tour. Why it's different to go as a choir and sing in the place that you're normally standing there and looking up and going, wow, this is beautiful. And now you're singing there. You have a completely different experience. And I don't care how long you've been in this choir. If you started in September and it's April, you're going to benefit from that. And you're going to sing differently after you've sung in that church.
Right.
So anyway, that was one major one. I got another complaint from a very, very prominent choral arranger who does lots of workshops, who I was a fan of, who wrote to me after I wrote I said something like 10 reasons why your choir should not perform the Hallelujah chorus at Christmas time.
Okay.
And I basically, there were serious reasons in there, but there were some reasons that were funny. They were intentionally funny. Occasionally, I like to be funny. That's part of my personality. Well, at least I think I'm funny sometimes. My wife probably doesn't agree. And so the person wrote back to me, you sound like Trump. Don't do that. You're rude. And just like 3 sentences, just rude. And this is a person that preaches love, gives workshops on love, workshops on everything. And I'm saying, my body of work, which is all about supporting others and writing stuff to help others, and I respond to people, is that's how you're going to present, information to me. So I was hurt by that one, because this was somebody who I thought, was would never write, even if he felt that way. I thought he would write it in a very positive way,
Right.
frame in a positive, I don't know, positive outside.
Yeah. Can we go
Little,
back to talking? Why did he? You sounded like Trump. Why?
because I wrote short comments, and it was negative.
Oh, okay.
Because I was
Because
writing, yeah,
because he's the only one that does that.
yeah. It's just like a way. It was a dig. It was an intention. Like, this is a man who I'd never spoken to in my entire life. I had seen
Okay.
him at ACDA. He was a guest. He was one of those big people at the ACDA conventions, and I'd watched him speak. I'd watched him sing. I'd taken stuff from him. I had a lot of respect for him, and so I was really hurt that this person would randomly just write something so cruel. It was cruel
Mm-hmm.
and harsh. So that was the second one. Those are two that I thought were not legitimate. But I'll tell you one that was legitimate. I'll give
Cool.
you, because I think that it's. I don't want to just paint this in a negative light, because when I first started writing this, as I explained to you, I'm writing it from a place of frustration that I feel that people are seeing opportunities, mixing up opportunities with achievements. They're taking the select few and giving them everything, and everybody else is suffering. And as a result, we have a declining country of people who sing, who go to choir concerts, who appreciate the art of music. That's why this is happening, because
Mm-hmm.
most students are told in fourth grade that they should lip sync, and they're done. And
Right.
how many parents have you spoken to that have told you that exact
Oh,
story?
constantly. Yeah.
Constantly. And it just angers you. I'm sure you get
Yeah.
angry.
I always
So
tell them. I always tell them it's because you never had me try to teach you how to sing yet.
exactly, and
Yeah.
I know that, and there are so many people who believe that. Although these articles that come out that say that 5% of the population is tone deaf and all this nonsense. Yes, but they can still learn how to sing. We all this stuff, but um, some people, because I wrote it in an authoritative way, especially at the beginning. Because when you're trying to be a voice in the field, you write things in a very clear way, and you try to convince people with your words.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people that thought that my approach was very condescending. And at first, I kind of ignored it. I ignored the comments from a few people, because a lot of people said positive things. I had way more positive than negatives. But then there was one person that said something in like a Facebook comment, like a thread, and said something to the effect of, I like some of this guy's ideas, but it really he rubs me the wrong way with his tone. I feel like his tone is just really condescending. And
Uh-huh.
again, if this person framed it in a way where they said that they were acknowledging me, they were acknowledging my thoughts, acknowledging my ideas, and just not happy with the way I was saying it. And so I wrote back to that person, on publicly on the thread, and I said, "Thank you for doing that. You know, I will certainly be more mindful, but I would certainly appreciate if you share with me some of the things that I've written, the tone that impacted you, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to turn people off. I really want to bring people up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes your idea is going to annoy somebody or anger somebody, but that's not my goal. My goal is really to connect, to get you to see something new, to bring clarity, bring new light that maybe you haven't seen before, or
Mm-hmm.
help you to clarify your message a little bit more." So it made me reevaluate how I write. And I think now sometimes I recycle and improve upon old blogs. If I think it's timely, I'll use it, but I always rewrite. Every time I do that, I go back to it and I rewrite and I reframe. So some of my older ones that have been molded in a more gentle way, because there is a way. Just like I said, there's a way to frame, um, uh, an opportunity as
Mm-hmm.
an opportunity. There's a way to frame what I was saying in a more positive and a gentler but clear approach. And so I've been much more aware as I've been writing as a result of that.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because I think uh, in the podcast medium, it makes it. I'm just thinking about how much scrolling on a page a person would have to do to even read the conversation that we've just had.
Yeah.
I think so. There's even a distinction between like a spoken word
Yeah.
medium, and we can all think about times in our lives where we've sent a text message to someone that was misinterpreted because a person will insert a tone
Yep.
as the reader based on whatever their baggage is.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't necessarily intended by the sender of the written words. And as a blogger, I imagined that 8 out of 10 problems that you might have gotten kicked back at you could be explained by that, in the sense that somebody's reading a tone or an
Right.
intention into what you've written that you don't hold, and
Yep.
then criticizes you for that position, and then you're trying to defend a straw man. Basically, you're trying to defend a position that you didn't even take, and that's definitely been my experience so far in 6 months into my podcast project, which is that most of the kickback that I've gotten on episodes has come from people who have clearly not listened to the episodes. So they have read, like you mentioned earlier on your articles, you have to have some kind of clickbaity title, or in my case, I put some kind of isolated quote out of context on an image, because I know that in order for people to see that there's an episode up there, there needs to be discussion on that post.
Right.
That's how that Facebook algorithms work. So there needs to be some kind of conversation going on, and most of the conversations end up being a response to that quote out of context, and then other responses to the people who responded to the quote out of context. And so we're getting further and further away from what anything about the episode actually was, which I'm fine. I'm not complaining. I that's the game. And I get that. But it's always an interesting thing that's where most of the criticism of content that I've produced comes from, is from stuff that is not even related to what I've done. So one of my favorite ones, I'll tell you this story. So on episode 12 of the show, that's the one with John Perkins, and we were talking about what constitutes or what creates a concept in people's mind of music being attached to some kind of racial origins. I guess that would be the best way I could summarize it. But go listen to it. Don't just whatever. But was somebody on the YouTube posting of that episode? With how on YouTube, if you post something, you can leave a timestamp of kind of like where along the way you are. And this person, I don't think is a choir director, but they hit me on Twitter, and then they hit me on YouTube also, saying that they were 5 minutes into the episode. Now this is a 90-minute episode. They were 5 minutes into the episode, and that they've spent their life trying to dismantle systems of white supremacy, and this episode is a triple yikes. That's what they said. And I was like, okay, so I get this notification while I'm running the Summer Choral Institute that I run, and I'm just baffled. I'm like, okay, so white supremacy is not really even like in that episode doesn't really get talked about specifically. It's in there, but it's not really talked about. And I'm trying to think what within 5 minutes of the show, other than the title of the show, would someone be able to get? And so I went back and listened to just the first 5 minutes.
It's just you speaking at the beginning, right?
Yeah, it's just me, but it's me speaking mostly. And two of the 5 minutes are my ads for Sight Reading Factory and for RyanMain.com. And so that leaves 3 minutes, and one of them is just me saying who the guest is. Like there was nothing within that first 5 minutes that even mentioned.
Wow.
That's what I feel like that's the world we live in. Like we live in a world where people want to score gotcha points against people who are brave enough to share their opinions. Right. And I think that was really the impetus for me wanting to talk with you about your experiences in that, because I feel like that's something where, in fact, I got a really, really nice text message the other day from a person, and like you, most of my feedback has been positive for doing the show. But this is a choir director of color in my area who I've known for quite a while, and wrote to thank me for doing the episodes that I've done that have touched on racial topics, because he feels like those are things that are elephants in the room for everybody that nobody wants to talk about, and appreciated me being brave enough to talk about it. And my first thought is how sad that we have to think of that as brave.
Right.
is that we have to think about talking about how humans interact with each other and what makes us interact in certain ways is such a taboo thing. And the other compliment that came out of that was that he felt like that I was the right person to do it because I don't let my emotions drive the conversation. And that's kind of why I thought I would do it, was because, somebody sending me those essentially roundabout way, calling me a white supremacist in a YouTube comment.
Yeah.
Fine. You call me that, that's fine. It's not going to stick because anybody who actually wants to listen to anything or look at how I've interacted with humans my whole life, it's not going to stick. So, it's an interesting thing. So in your experience, do you feel like when you then go, and this is the part I haven't really quite gotten to yet in my life of making choir stuff public, do you feel like most of the interactions with your local, say, colleagues slash people who you like, choral people who you interact with on a more personal level, does your blog ever enter into that? Like, do they bring it up? Do they ask you about it? Do they criticize you for it?
They ignore it completely.
Interesting. I'm having the same experience.
I find that the colleagues that I thought would be most supportive of it are the ones that are least supportive of it.
Interesting.
I find that I have made so many friends and colleagues around the world, not just the country, the world, who have said that my message resonates and we work back and forth. There was a man in Australia who liked one of my articles, the best oral training exercise you'll ever use. It's a simple oral training exercise. It's just a philosophical philosophical approach, and he took it and he ran with it, and he made new oral training exercises for me to put back on my site. Man I never spoke to, just in Australia doing it. I have colleagues around the world who have reached out to me, who composers, who have said, who agreed with something I was writing, or my music too, for that matter, like the way I framed something because they found it through my blog. And I mean, prominent people have really, really reached out to me. But around my area, one person for some reason joined my Choral Clarity Facebook group, and I don't know how they got in there, but by accident they were placed in there. Whether they placed them in or I placed them, I don't know how it happened. Was angry, really angry that they made it into my group. I mean, it was really very, very harsh. And this is a prominent person in my area, and I'm thinking, okay, whether I did it or you did it, it was a mistake. You don't want to be there. Just take yourself out. But it was like nasty comments written. So I found that for some reason around me, I guess maybe because I'm married. I live in the city. I live about 40 miles away from my job, and now I have 2 children, and I have a busy life. I don't have time to dedicate right now to the organizations. I mean, I'd love to do workshops, to give workshops and stuff like that, but I don't really have the hospitality time, and to be president or be treasurer or do those things. I really admire and appreciate people doing that, but I don't. I think these colleagues of mine, they don't appreciate the fact that I'm not willing to help in that way, and they also don't necessarily like my message because it makes them think about what they're doing differently. So it's a lot easier to not rethink the message, so they just ignore it like it does not exist.
Right. I wonder if part of it too is that the people who you interact with more locally and on a personal level, personal / professional level, they see you in real life doing your job just like them, like they're doing those same things. And here comes your opportunity to create a platform where your ideas and concepts are being shared and discussed and whatever. And so there's a little bit of a who does he think he is kind of a vibe. And I think that they're part of that is this kind of natural um, locals aren't as good as people from far away kind of bias that we always have. And that's not just music. People do it all the time. But I know out in the Midwest, maybe as a New Yorker, you probably know that this is a thing. But in the Midwest, all we have to do is put that so-and-so, such and such is brought here from New York to do anything in the fine arts, and it's automatically going to sell tickets, and it's automatically going to be thought of as an important, impressive thing,
Wow.
because there is a bias towards anyone brought from far away must be better than the person who's local. And so that could be, you're experiencing that also, in the sense that they're, why is this person that I see on an everyday basis, who's just a normal teacher like me, elevated to having important opinions?
Right.
Whereas people, because I've had exactly the same experience. Almost 100% of the interaction and really super positive feedback I've had on this show have been from people who live far away from me.
Yeah.
But at the same time too, to give our colleagues credit, and it's probably this, I know this is true of me, and it's probably true in some extent to your situation, is that our local colleagues they've probably already heard some of our shtick. Like they already know what it is. That I know my local colleagues already know that I'm an outspoken, opinionated person, and they've already heard my brand. Like, they don't need to tune into this
Right.
show because they already know what I think about like all these different things. Which,
Maybe.
yeah,
I mean, I think there's some of the truth there, but I get more things like we have a lot of students go to All County and All State and all that stuff, and I'll have comments from colleagues at that time of year saying, "Oh, you know, there must be something in the water in Plainview that
uh-huh,
happened. There must be something in the water. There must be something in the water that you have low basses. There must be something in the water that you have low altos. You know, there's always something in the water that
yep,
there's talent, and we have a small program, and I'm trying to show people that there's an approach, and I'm
mm-hmm,
trying to give people that approach instead of. So I think people are not searching for why, and I think that's also the personality of a lot of people. I always search for the why.
right,
I'll try and shorten the story, but tell you something very quickly. When I was in student teaching, I begged to student teach with this one choir director who's amazing, the best high school choir director I'd ever seen, heard. I was fortunate enough to student teach with him, and he was sending all of his voice students to a private teacher in the neighborhood. And
mm-hmm,
this voice teacher was well respected. I mean, really, really well respected. And I started studying with that private voice teacher after I finished my student teaching there. And what I noticed was that they had contradicting views of the voice. The private voice teacher and this amazing choral director. They saw
uh-huh,
things completely differently. And these poor students were being torn between this guy who I idolized as a choral director and this voice teacher who was teaching me so much that I knew was right. And I went into my teaching career saying, I want to have a choir like the guy on the right, but I know too much from the guy on the left.
uh-huh,
What the heck do I do here? And this is how I started my career, trying to navigate the voice and learn how to be a voice teacher who teaches choir, which is my
uh-huh,
approach. That's why everybody's a soloist. That's why um, that's again the foundation of my approach. But the point that I'm making is that I challenged myself right when I started teaching between the amazing choral director with the choral vowels and the fish lips and the sound far back in your throat and all of the stuff that makes a great sounding choir, who, by the way, was really welcoming of students and allowed and had a self-selected choir. So he was really just a wonderful teacher. But vocal technique wise, I knew that his approach wasn't working. But if I used the solo guy's approach, I would never have a choir that sounded like the other guys.
mm-hmm,
So that challenge was what drove me. It drove me to improve. And right now I'm going through that same renaissance. Well, I believe in this 8 students run select groups. I believe in student run groups. And I believe in this, but I don't have a select group that sounds like JD Frizzell's group. But I've got the talent in there. I mean, JD's also amazing on top of that. I'm not saying I could do what he does, but um, I've got the talent of the kids to do that. But I don't want to. I don't want to hurt my student run program by creating a select group.
Right.
How do I do this? So again, my brain has been spinning for 5 years trying to figure out how I could take new information and infiltrate my old information, not get rid of it, but build upon it.
Right.
And I find that as a whole, my colleagues and the people that I talk to are not willing to do it because they found something that works. They got into their locked system, and they're going to do that locked system until the day they retire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are. I'm going to estimate based on my experience. I would say probably 60 to 70% of choir directors that I have, the term I use, I call them clock punchers. That they're there to do their job during the school day, and as long as they're maintaining a serviceable program, they're going to do that till they retire, and then go do other things. And I don't really even mean to demonize that, because for some people it is just a job.
Right.
However, people like you and I, and I'm going to make the assumption anyone listening to this conversation right now,
right?
Why would you listen to a show like this if you're not someone who's seeking out the why behind what we do, or why would you read Choral Clarity if you're not interested in figuring out how you do what you do and how to make it better? There is, though, I think, a certain resentment from people who are clock punchers, who know that they are capable of more, that they are able to do, or would be able to do more if they were willing to put in their work, but don't do it for one reason or the other, because maybe it's laziness, maybe it's life has thrown them a bunch of curveballs that they couldn't handle. Maybe it's because of family situation that doesn't allow them to do any extra work towards their profession, or maybe it's just a little bit of a self-loathing that goes on. But I think there are people like the audience of like our audiences, essentially, that are hungry for conversations and explorations of why it is that what we do works. In fact, you mentioned that the comments about there being something in the water in Plainview. There is something in the water in Lee Summit. My colleagues hear that all the time. We have 3 high schools in our district that are all fantastic, and my colleagues are brilliant. At all 3 schools, we have these very high functioning choirs, and we hear a lot of the same types of comments. And in a lot of ways, it's hurtful.
Yeah.
Because it ignores the gigantic amounts of work that it takes to constantly have low altos, or constantly have low basses, or whatever it is, because that means so in other words, it's like it never occurs to people that the reason that we're consistently able to do the things that we do is because we teach them to do it.
Right.
And it also kind of, when I hear those types of comments, I get offended too, not just on my own behalf, but on the behalf of my support staff, on the behalf of the feeder program teachers that send us kids with the ability to do all these things that are awesome, and setting a foundation for them to love music, so that when they get to me, I can take that love and turn it into an expertise. Those types of things. It's a team that we have that goes into creating all of that. And so when I hear those types of comments, it's like you're not just putting me down. You're putting down the elementary school teacher that fed me a fifth of my kids, or whatever.
And also, and not to mention the students, because a lot of I mean, yes, there are always those talented students that come in and they don't need very little direction from us. But there are a lot of students that overcome lots of hurdles to get to where they are. And their confidence, they sing out, they were afraid to sing, and now they're starring in a musical or have a solo, or they want a career in singing, and they literally were not even good enough, freshman year to stand out for anything. And these students are working hard. They deserve to be recognized for working hard, not just water that they're drinking.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's a shame, and I think it also ties a little bit into. It might be counterintuitive, but one of the more recent episodes I did with Chris Maunu was about choral snobbery, choral elitism. that has to do with, I think, the same concept. The reason I say it's counterintuitive, but is because I think that the looking down our noses at high achieving programs as being because something is in the water or whatever is also a form of snobbery.
Completely.
It is assuming it. Here'd be an expression that I would use to describe it. It's hating the good for being
Right.
good.
Right.
And there's no asking why in that scenario. There is just saying, I see something that is on its surface looks very easy, and willfully ignoring what
Right.
goes into creating. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about at the very beginning of just putting out an episode of or a blog about a concept. In your case, it was about the self-selected ensembles and all of that, and not taking the time to dig into why or why not that might work, or why or why not that might be the best thing to do.
Right. Well, I use JD for Zell. First of all, Chris Manu, what beautiful work, and the videos that he's doing with his choirs now
Mm-hmm.
are stunning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I love his work. JD Frizzell is another one with his one voice a cappella group. And, I spoke to him because I was trying to figure out how to tap into that, what he's doing. I'm just so blown away by his work. And it turns out he's got a self-selected choir. And all of those students that you hear in that one voice group are in his self-selected group. And it got me to realize again that, that self-selected core really does work. It builds your program, and you could still have that select group thrive and get opportunities and get special opportunities, but not all the opportunities. Not every opportunity is made for 16 voices. Some
Right.
things, traveling to Europe is not necessarily made for 16 voices.
Mm-hmm.
Or performing a composer's premier work, with a 400 voice choir is not necessarily for 16 voices. You can have 80 voices come and do
Right.
that. Or singing the national anthem at a baseball game does not have to be 16 voices unless they're providing you with 16 microphones.
Uh-huh.
There are so many different opportunities there. And yes, I agree. And the other thing, that going back to select groups, just on the other end, to have a great select group, you have to be a great choir director. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, we're not discounting the fact that these choir directors, they're performing at ACDA national conventions and get standing ovations with their select choir 60 are not amazing choir directors.
Mm-hmm.
All I'm asking is, what is happening to the other students? And are there students that could be benefiting? And where is ACDA or NAFME? Where are they recognizing excellence from groups that are not the elite students from a school
Mm-hmm.
that are still doing amazing work?
Right.
I would argue that, the best high school choir that I heard, which was on Long Island, the teacher is long retired. It was a self-selected group. Basically, it was a self-selected group at night, and then during the day, self-selected, and then at night he had those same students. He had them more selected at night with additional kids added in, like younger kids added in. So it was, let's say 80 kids that were age appropriate, that self-selected into the chorus, and then at night there'd be 80 kids, but 60 of them were during the day, and 20 more of them would be freshmen, sophomores, and so on. So when the choir would perform on tour, it would be 100 students. When the choir was performing at the concert, it would be 100 students. And so there was this balance, and this choir director had an amazing choir. My point being that I'm certainly not against seeing these great groups perform, but I am questioning why you can't hear a self-selected group that could sing these pieces, same repertoire, same level of repertoire as a select group, really, really well, but
Mm-hmm.
a self-selected group where you come back from the concert saying, "Hey, I can do that with my group. I want to learn how to do that," as opposed to, "Must be nice to have 80 great students in
Right.
a program."
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a it's a recognition. I'll just put it this way. For me, everything I do, partly because of my personality and the way I process things, is that I'm very methodical. And if I say something, I chose my words very carefully, and I meant it. And I probably knew the etymology of those words back like 3,000 years. So because I'm a nerd, and like that's something I take language very seriously. And so if I'm going to have a feeling like jealousy, for example,
Right.
towards a choir director who does something at a high level, or I'll just take the Chris Manu example with all his beautiful videos. Like, that's awesome. I would love to do that, and I see that and I go, well, we're not doing that right now. I can't
Right.
do that. Like, we put some videos out every once in a while, but we're not doing anything that's as artistic as what they're doing right now. But the way I do it, the way I then process that is I look at that and I decide that the first thing I'm going to think or feel about that is, wow, he's doing really, really cool stuff. And then the second thing I think about that is, what ways could I up my game?
Yep.
Right. And then I intentionally choose to not let the third feeling, which oftentimes creeps in, which is, it must be nice to be able to do that, or like, I bet you, like, who does he think he is, or
Right.
whatever, like that. That's something that we could choose to feel those things uh,
Right.
about somebody who's operating at the top level of our field, or we could choose to say, what is it that he's doing or she's doing that makes them excellent, and figure out why it works and how much of
Right.
that I could incorporate into what I'm doing. And I think those of us who seek out those types of questions are the ones that are driving the profession forward. And and,
Right.
and, and I'm frankly not willing to apologize for it. Like,
Yeah.
it's I think we're doing what everybody should be doing, and just not, in our case, both of us putting all of those thoughts and explorations out in front of other people, is hopefully going to start more and more conversations. And the technology that we're using to do that is making those conversations easier and easier.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate what you're doing,
Thank
um,
you.
and I've appreciated this conversation. And I know I'm starting to hear my house get noisy
Uh-huh.
as all the folks come back uh, to this, what is a shared vacation house in Key West right now with a couple different families, and I know you've got some small ones to get back to. So I say,
Yeah.
let's wrap this up, but let's also leave it open to maybe coming back and doing it again sometime if we have
Good.
some really important topics to discuss, so we can keep discussing the why. Sound good?
Well, I love it. Love it. Thank you so
Awesome.
much. You're doing a great job. Really
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
what you're bringing to the community. So thanks so much.
You too, and all of the listeners will be reminded to go out and check out Choral Clarity also. So we'll post in the show notes how to get to all of your stuff, so that they can access some of the articles that we talked about today in this episode. As I've always been telling my listeners, to go read the stuff that we actually talk about, so you get full context, and so hopefully we'll drive some people towards the blog.
Hopefully you'll get a good quote from me that can stir people up and get them a little.
Yes, I'll dig through and find some clickbait, just
uh,
just to get you in trouble.
Sounds good.
All
Thanks so
right.
much.
All right. Thank you so much. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Thank you all, as always, for sticking around to the end of an episode. As you know, for those of you who have been listening to the show for a while, if the conversation gets interesting and stays interesting, I'm going to keep with it and keep diving into these topics. So thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you're still with us, that probably means that you found something stimulating. If that is the case, I hope you will consider supporting the show in a variety of ways. So let's remind everyone how to do that. So the best ways you can do that to support the show are, number one, subscribe to the podcast on a podcast app. That is very, very helpful for me developing the numbers that I can demonstrate to support the show. That's very helpful. Leave a rating. Even better, leave a comment. As we go in order of helpfulness now, the next thing you can do, really step up yourself a notch, would be to share an episode. Find an episode that really spoke to you. Go to the website, copy the link, and share it on a social media page, and tell somebody why you liked that episode and why you think they should listen to it too. I know that's another level of commitment, but my goodness, that helps so much to get the show out there. Advertising on social media is so expensive these days. So that's a very helpful thing. And if you're really a believer in the importance of these deep-leveled and long-form conversations that you can't get at conventions and you can't get in college, consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Patreon supporters are going to have access to some content that only supporters on Patreon will see. So far, there is already one episode for Patreon only up on patreon.com/choralosophy. Our first couple Patreons cracked the ice and supported the show in the last month, so now July has the first Patreon episode, which you should go check out. And there will be one new episode added each month for those of you who choose to chip in as little as $3 a month, something you won't even feel, but will make a huge difference for me being able to promote the show and to start to recover some of the immense costs of getting a show started. So thank you all for listening all the way to the end, and help us out the best you can by spreading the word, and I hope to see you next time.